guys, I'm Bill Duggan from A&A. I love being in a room of primarily agency folks because I was one of you guys for more than 15 years. I started my career in media before media was cool at an agency called Dancer Fitzgerald Sample. Who has heard of that agency? Morphed into Saatchi, very good. And then was an account guy at Gray for about 15 years. I'm now at the A&A, the Association of National Advertisers. We are a marketing and advertising trade association. We represent the clients, currently with about 750 members. So I'm here to talk to you about, the title is Advertising's Transparency Crisis. I believe that it can be argued that we are in the least transparent, most opaque period regarding the relationship between the client-side marketer and particularly the media agency than in any of our respective careers. So again, I think that's a pretty bold statement. Most opaque, least transparent. And let me just talk about why. So we've seen all the headlines. Hopefully some of these are from Digiday about rebates and kickbacks. And I want to take you on the journey as to how we got here. Actually, our journey likely began about 4 or 5 years ago with the emergence of agency trading desks. But in the interest of time, I'm going to start in 2014, which really accelerated A&A's work on transparency when we did some joint research with Forrester. And the research actually had 3 parts. One was programmatic, one was measurement, and the third part was media transparency. The highlights for media transparency follow. We asked, and again, this was a survey primarily among client-side marketers, do you have concerns about the level of transparency between you as the client and your media agencies? 46% said yes, 36% said no, 18% not sure. Follow that up with, over the past year, have concerns about transparency increased, stayed the same, or decreased? 42% said increased. Peeling that back a little bit, we looked at 4 broad areas related to transparency. Do I know what I'm getting? So that includes how and where digital ads are placed, lack of visibility into data used to define target audiences. Am I getting what I paid for? Reliance on served impressions versus viewed, click fraud, bots, piracy. Are my agencies working for me? Not knowing if my agency makes money from media sellers, rebates, agencies arbitraging, increased agency consolidation, limiting choice in agency trading desks. And finally, what's the impact of intermediaries, programmatic buying, a complicated marketplace? So I'm going to ask for your forgiveness on the next eye chart, but then I promise I will simplify it. What we did for those 4 buckets, 4 big buckets, and the respective points underneath is on a 10-point scale. We asked, how concerned are you? So what you see here is the top 3 box, 8, 9, and 10. So here's where it gets a little bit simple. So the top advertiser concerns, served versus viewed impressions, media rebates. We have a group called the A&A Media Leadership Committee. This research was presented at our media conference in March 2014. The A&A Media Committee met a month or so later. We reviewed this research, and somebody said, we need a task force. We need a transparency task force to dig behind some of these issues. And the issues at the time, rebates, programmatic, arbitrage. And so we wouldn't be boiling the ocean. We agreed, and the task force included A&A member companies among those disciplines, fairly heavy in CPG, technology, financial services. And we decided that the initial focus should be on rebates. We called in 4 companies that have some level of expertise in rebates, both here and overseas. And the purpose was for them to provide an education as to what may be happening here in the States on this issue of rebates. And the story we got from all four was incredibly consistent. They said, yes, rebates are happening here in the US. Rebates are happening more now than they used to. Digital is accelerating rebates. The digital world can be murky and complex, so rebates can hide in that. However, rebates are not confined to new media. It's happening in outdoor, it's happening in radio. And some agencies are taking practices from overseas regarding rebates and importing them to the US. Last year, Ad Age called media transparency one of their biggest stories of the year. The Wall Street Journal noted this survey in 5 issues facing Madison Avenue in 2015. They referenced programmatic buying and concerns about transparency in the A&A Forrester survey. So again, we've been talking about this issue at A&A 3 or 4 years. I mentioned the Forrester survey, which was published. It got some nice press. A year prior to that, there was another survey that we did that focused on rebates, published, got some nice press. But nobody was really paying attention until the tipping point, which was March 5th, 2015. I can tell you the time. It was between 2 and 2:45. Not so far from here, Hollywood, Florida, close to Fort Lauderdale. At the A&A Media Leadership Conference, I saw a couple of badges from folks from MediaCom, so you may recognize this picture from probably 20 years ago. This is John Mandel, the former co-CEO of MediaCom. By the way, one of the consultants that I mentioned that we brought in to educate us about the issue of media rebates. He did a presentation at the A&A Media Leadership Conference that said, rebates are happening. They're happening fairly big time. And finally, people started paying attention. This was all over the place. In fact, that last one, Group M, the very next day, they put out a press release responding to that. So we got attacked. John was personally attacked. For any of you that may know John or have heard of John, he's fairly outspoken. He says what's on his mind. He was attacked as being an ingrate, a whistleblower, somebody with an axe to grind. A&A was attacked. I was attacked. My boss, Bob Leibes, was attacked. How dare you put John Mandel on the stage? You know, how dare you? If we had one do-over, it's that John's comments cast a wide paintbrush over the entire agency community and pretty much said all or most agencies are dirty. So if there was one do-over, it would have been to clarify that. We even went so far as to issue an apology, a public apology, regretting the implication that all US media agencies get undisclosed rebates. The agency community was pissed at us. Then, just a couple of weeks later, again, John's comments were March the 5th. This press release probably happened a week or so later about we regretted what we said. Ad Age came out with this cover story that says, kickbacks, yes, they're real. Secret rebates, I can't even read this all, sketchy services and offshore deals. So this helped legitimize the perspective that John put out there. So the road continued. There were discussions with our board of directors as to, okay, what do we do now? And there were 2 points of view. One point of view was we need to partner with the 4As and collaborate with the 4As. And A&A, by the way, has had a great historical relationship with the 4As to investigate this issue further and offer some solutions. And there was another perspective that said this is something that we need to do on its own. So the road forked, and we took both sides of the fork. We made an announcement on April the 24th. 4As and A&A create cross-industry task force to establish best practices in transparency. that the 4As and ANA are taking decisive action to address concerns about media transparency, bringing together industry leaders from the marketer and agency communities. The task force's goals are to identify material issues and address them with constructive dialogue and pragmatic courses of action. And it's comprised of a bunch of heavy hitters. My boss, Bob Leadis, our chairman of the board, Tony Pace, Mark Pritchard from P&G. You could read the names on the agency side. It's kind of a who's who of agency leaders. And what we agreed is we would draft principles of conduct for clients and agencies to consider related to media transparency and rebates, provide suggested language for client-agency contracts to address media rebates. So this has been a work in progress. We've actually been meeting since June, and we are close to a public announcement. But as an example of what we mean by principles, as two examples, the default principle in all client-agency relationships is full disclosure and full transparency in media planning and buying, unless there is an exception that the client has agreed to in advance and is covered by a separate agreement. Rebates and other non-transparent incentives are not accepted industry practice in the US. As a best practice, the agency-client agreement should require the agency to report and return to the client any rebates and incentives received by the agency that are based on either the client's spend or the aggregation of the agency's other client spend, including said client spend. Obviously, a lawyer involved on that wording. So we're working on that. I expect those to be released before Thanksgiving. So the other fork in the road is for ANA to hire an independent consultant. We really felt that we needed to, while we appreciate the collaboration with the 4As, we really felt that this is such a polarizing issue that we needed to do this on our own and hire an independent consultant to provide an outside perspective on transparency issues overall, including rebates. So we released an RFP in June. This was very public. I would imagine some of you in the room heard of this. The objectives: demystify the landscape. So that is, are rebates happening? And if they are they happening a little or are they happening a lot? So it's finding the truth. Understand the role of holding companies. Understand if media plans are being compromised. Determine where marketers may be having bad behavior that could be contributing to things. And develop practical solutions. You know, very importantly, practical solutions. So we released the RFP June 17th. By July 10th, we asked for an expression of interest. 30 firms said that they were interested. July 24th, the proposals were due. We had 26 proposals submitted. That's how I spent my late July and most of my August looking at the proposals. We met with 14 companies, and we awarded to 2. And we made this announcement last week. So we selected K2 Intelligence and Ubiquity Firm Decisions to lead the media transparency fact-finding effort. I'm curious, who here has heard, before this announcement, has heard of K2 Intelligence? I'm seeing one hand, 2 hands, and if the CIA lady was here, I'm sure her hand would go up. Ubiquity Firm Decisions, you know, much more of an industry player, but fairly few. So K2 is a fact-finding firm, really with little experience in our category, although they said that they get smart very quickly in new categories. In Ubiquity Firm Decisions, an auditing media management company that we felt brought a level of expertise. So this was just October 20th. We released, we press released, and the journey continues that we would expect the first phase of this to last 3 months or so. So racing through this, you know, I was asked to leave takeaways, so be curious. One of my favorite lines is, you don't know what you don't know. If rebates have been happening for a while, many ANA members were not aware. Takeaway 2, Transparency is the new black. You know, I really believe, and the previous speaker mentioned it, that agency models will emerge that take advantage of transparency. And finally, look at contracts, because the contract is the foundation of all agreements between clients and agencies. So, so more to come. Phase one of this process is a series of interviews among industry people that have something to say. If you or a friend have something to say, feel free to reach out to me at that email. And you know, all of these conversations will be kept confidential and anonymous. So thank you for your time.
Thanks. I wanted to ask you a question because I know it's not really what you sort of talked about in your presentation, but as you know, the ANA represents a lot of clients. One of the big issues on the challenge boards, which are now outside, somebody wrote, you know, procurement was up there. I'm just wondering, sort of, you know, clients that have leaned on price efficiencies for a long time, I mean, and how that affects, have they sort of, in your opinion, do you think they've leaned too much on price efficiencies at the expense of choosing the right agencies? You
know, the procurement wave has been around for a long time, about 12 years. We actually have a conference that's 100% dedicated to procurement. It's our second biggest conference, believe it or not. I think there are good and bad procurement people, that it can't be all about price all the time. That I think that the best procurement people figure out win-wins that bring efficiencies to the client and the agency. But certainly one of the objectives of our study is to figure out where client bad behavior could possibly be driving agency bad behavior, and procurement could be part of that. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also wanted to talk about some of Brad Jakeman from PepsiCo's comments at the ANA meeting. Right. Maybe you could give the audience just a quick sentence or two background of some of what he talked about, because I know it's something that really directly related to agencies.
He mentioned middle-aged white guys. So what's the matter with that? It's just, so one of his perspectives was that the agency world, needs to be more diverse, and there's just too many people. Even if you look around the room here, there's too many people that look the same. And he felt that at Pepsi, as he builds his team, that diversity of background, diversity of origin helps build better teams. Yeah. And he really said that the agency model is on fairly shaky ground right now. Yeah. For a lot of the reasons that you addressed in your opening, that agencies to some extent have been disintermediated. Again, to some extent, that there's clients that are going directly to publishers for deals. More and more client-side marketers have in-house agencies, so they're doing work that was formerly done at agencies in-house. I think media fragmentation. I'm old enough to remember when it was just one agency. When I worked at Gray, it was just Gray, and we led the business. Now, there's Gray, there's MediaCom, there's Gray Digital, if that still exists. That agency fragmentation, I think, has made agencies less important, because there's no, somebody talked about what agency leads, and it often gets confusing. I think the client needs to lead.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you. I know you're going to be doing a breakout later, so we can talk more.
Thank you.
Cool.